Hi everyone, my name is Emily Teacher, and today we're going to be reading the story The Bounty, Part 1. When the captain of His Majesty's ship Bounty spoke to the men on watch a little after midnight, everything seemed normal. 3 weeks before, on April 4th, 1789, Captain Bligh and his crew had embarked for the West Indies from the tropical South Pacific island of Tahiti. For 6 months, they had collected breadfruit plants, which grew in profusion in Tahiti. The purpose of the voyage was to transport over 1,000 of these plants, already carefully stowed on board, to the West Indies. They were to be grown as a food crop on the large plantations there. So this crew with Captain Bligh was currently on the island of Tahiti, where breadfruit plants grew in abundance. There was so many of them there, so they went to take the breadfruit plants, bring them in their ship, and bring them back home to the West Indies to grow as food there. Captain Bligh probably should have realized that not all was as serene as it seemed. He knew that his men had been loath to leave the pleasant island life to return to the more rigid structure of life aboard ship. He had, in fact, been dissatisfied with the slovenly habits that had developed while the Bounty had lain at anchor. Some of the crew failed to care properly for the sails. Others had pilfered from the ship because no one was keeping proper watches. So, because the island life was so lovely for the sailors, they stopped taking care of the ship. So, Captain Bligh didn't really realize that anything was wrong, but he should have noticed because the men weren't taking care of everything as they should when it was time to get back on the ship. Furthermore, Captain Bligh seemed to have lost confidence in his chief mate, Fletcher Christian. It had been Christian's lackadaisical attitude, Bligh believed, that had resulted in the sailors neglecting their duties on Tahiti. Bligh had rebuked Christian for failing to supervise the men properly. If this had rankled the chief mate, Bligh had not perceived any change in him when the two had dined together. So the first mate, right, Fletcher Christian, the first mate is the one right under the captain. So it was his responsibility to take care of all the sailors and make sure they were doing their jobs properly. But he had not made sure of that. So Captain Bligh blamed Fletcher Christian for the sailors' neglect, and he rebuked him for it. But still, he didn't see that anything was wrong between Bligh and Christian. So let's see what was really going on here. Despite these annoyances, Bligh's mood was calm when he returned to his cabin. He had no inkling of what was about to happen, as, rocked by the gentle motion of the ship, he fell asleep. Had he been prudent, he might have posted a guard outside his cabin. As it was, the door was not even locked. Shortly before dawn, the captain was awakened abruptly. Fletcher Christian, accompanied by several crew members, burst in and informed him that they had taken over the ship. They had confiscated all the weapons on board. They had also locked up 18 crew members who remained loyal to the captain. So, there was a mutiny on board. Right? Bligh didn't think anything was wrong, so he went to sleep with his door unlocked. But this first mate, Christian, came in with some crew members, and they said, well, we took away all the weapons. We locked up the crew members who are still loyal to you, and we are taking over the ship. Bligh warned those who held him prisoner that for this audacious act they would be hanged. His warning, however, had no effect. Later that morning, he and the loyal crew members were pushed into an open boat. They were permitted to take some weapons with them and were given a small quantity of food and water. Bligh watched helplessly as Christian and the remaining crew members on board sailed off in the Bounty. He and the other passengers were left in the tiny boat to their fate in the middle of the vast ocean. So Bligh warned them, "You will all die for this," because mutiny on a ship is the worst thing you can do, right? The captain is in charge, and if anyone goes against the captain, then the consequences usually were for them to be hanged or to die. But there was nothing Bligh could do. So him and his loyal crew members were pushed onto a smaller boat and told to leave. 3 movies have been made of the mutiny that took place on the Bounty on the morning of April 28, 1789. All 3 depict Captain Bligh as a cruel man who treated his crew badly and was himself responsible for what happened. However, by using information in court documents, letters, and diaries written by people who participated in these events, several historians argue that Bligh was a conscientious naval officer. He was no stricter than other sea captains of the time. While he had ordered several men flogged 12 or even 24 lashes for being disobedient, this was the usual punishment at that time in the British Navy for quite minor offenses. To this day, there is no unanimous explanation for this event that changed the lives of these men forever. So, the movies and famous things that made this event on the Bounty ship famous show that Captain Bligh was a horrible and cruel captain who did bad things. But from the real life documents that historians have found, really they think that Captain Bligh was a regular naval officer, right? He was conscientious. He did his job and he did his job well. He did have men flogged or hit, beaten for doing bad things, being disobedient, but at that time that was a very normal thing to happen. So still we don't know who was at fault here, right? Was Bligh really a really terrible captain, or were the other men just really happy with the relaxed island life that they found and decided to take over the boat? We don't really know. But maybe someday we'll find out. Thank you for reading with me today. We do have links that are related to each of our articles. If you want the link for this video here, you can find them down in the description below.